Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something pretty interesting, the Enlightenment Method. So maybe we should start with the basics, right? Like, what is this Enlightenment Method all about? How's it different from other personal growth stuff out there?
Well, it's kind of a flip, really. Like most approaches focus on adding things, right? New
Yeah,
skills, new knowledge.
yeah, more.
Right. But the Enlightenment method, it's about taking away, removing the obstacles that are already inside us, like fear, insecurities, all that ego stuff.
So less is more, huh?
Exactly. The idea is that real lasting change comes from transforming from the inside, not from trying to fix things externally.
Okay, so less fixing, more transforming. But how do you actually do that? I mean, how do you start chiseling away all that stuff?
Well, that's where the practices come in. You sent over one on tree pose or Vrksasana.
Oh, yeah, that one really caught my eye.
Yeah, it's a great way to actually experience the kind of awareness that this method is all about.
So it's not just about reading about awareness, but actually feeling it.
Exactly. It's a direct experience. In
Yeah.
tree pose, you're grounding through your foot, reeking up through your crown, finding that balance.
And the instructions say to keep your eyes open, which seems a little counterintuitive for a balance pose.
Right. And that's the point. Just like you need open eyes to balance physically, you need open awareness to navigate life. You
Oh,
see, it's all connected. The pose encourages you to just observe every sensation, the wobble, the stillness, without judging.
interesting. One of the sources actually compares this kind of awareness to the Christian idea of being inhabited by the Holy Spirit. Is there a connection there?
Oh, absolutely. The words might be different, but they both point to this sense of presence, this aliveness that's beyond our usual mind chatter.
Like tuning into a frequency that's always been there, but we just haven't been paying attention to.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And when we do tune in, that's when we start to see where we're out of alignment, where our actions don't match our values.
Which brings us to cognitive dissonance. That feeling when you're like, wait, my actions and my beliefs don't match up. I tend to think of that as a bad thing, but the Enlightenment method seems to view it differently, right?
Totally. Most self-help stuff says, avoid that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
But this method's like, hey, pay attention. This discomfort is trying to tell you something.
So it's a signal, not something to run from.
Exactly.
Is
It's
that
like your internal GPS recalculating,
Yeah.
trying to get you back on course
back on course
towards greater integrity, greater self-awareness. It's showing you where you're holding on to beliefs or behaviors that aren't serving you anymore.
Okay, so cognitive dissonance, it's like a wake-up call. And this is where that gardener analogy comes in, right? The one from the source material.
Oh, the gardener, yes.
It describes this timeless garden, fertile soil from past experiences, and the seed of desired change. And the gardener tends to it so patiently, letting things grow naturally.
Beautiful imagery, right. And it perfectly captures the essence of this method.
It does. It even mentions a serene lake reflecting the present moment, where past, present, and future all come together.
Right. It's all about creating the right conditions for change to happen organically. Just like a seed needs the right soil and sunlight.
So patience and trust are key here.
Absolutely. It's not about forcing change through willpower, but about surrendering to the process. We plant the seed, we tend the soil, and then we trust.
Speaking of trust, one line really struck me from the sources. It said, reality unfiltered and unadorned is the only catalyst for true change because it is the only thing that is. What a powerful statement.
It is, isn't it? And in the context of the Enlightenment method, it means that lasting change doesn't come from trying to force reality to fit our desires. It comes from aligning ourselves with what is.
Accepting what is, even if it's uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And allowing that to be the catalyst for our transformation.
So the Enlightenment method, it's really challenging a lot of those conventional ideas about personal growth, huh?
It is. It's like flipping the script, you know?
Stripping away, not adding on, surrender, not control, aligning with reality instead of trying to manipulate it.
And embracing paradox. That seems to be like a thread that runs through all of this material you sent over.
Paradox.
Yeah. Like the Enlightenment method, it's not about finding those easy answers or following a set of rules. It's about holding those contradictory ideas at the same time and seeing what comes up.
Okay, so like how do you even do that? Do you have an example?
Well, we were just talking about how reality is the catalyst for change, right?
Mm.
But then true change requires us to surrender our ego's grip on reality.
Yeah. It's like you have to let go to really grasp it, right?
Exactly.
Oh. And what about surrender itself? That seems like a paradox too. It's often seen as weakness, but in this method, it's more like,
It's strength,
yeah, it's like an active choice to align with something bigger.
right? One of the sources talks about willfulness versus willingness. Willfulness being all ego-driven, and willingness being surrendering to something beyond ourselves.
So not abandoning our will altogether, but choosing to align it with something.
Bigger, yeah. It could be, nature, the universe, or even just your own deepest wisdom.
There's a really great part in one of these sources that breaks down what surrender is and also what it's not.
Oh yeah, that one's important. It says that true surrender isn't about escaping responsibility or avoiding pain.
Or giving your power away, right?
Right. It's not about that at all. True surrender is about consciously letting go of that ego control and trusting that there's something bigger at work.
And trusting even when you don't have all the answers.
Exactly. And that trust can be cultivated through experience, like in the tree pose practice we talked about.
Right.
The more we practice surrendering to the present moment, the more we strengthen that trust muscle.
Okay, so surrender, it's really at the heart of the Enlightenment method. Not passive surrender, but active engagement with life.
I like that. Active engagement. And it's informed by awareness and trust.
Oh, and this also reminds me, one of the sources makes a point of saying that true surrender is different from, like, false surrender.
Oh, right. False surrender.
Yeah, where we give our power away to, I don't know, an object, an impulse, some charismatic leader or cause.
Right. That's a really important distinction to make. False surrender, it's about seeking security outside ourselves. But true surrender, it's about connecting to the strength within.
So the Enlightenment method, it's really emphasizing the difference between those two.
Yeah, it matters. Because it's through true surrender that we can actually tap in to the transformative power of this method.
Letting go and allowing ourselves to be guided by something beyond the ego.
Exactly. That's where real growth and liberation can happen.
Which brings us right back to paradox, doesn't it? I mean, one of the sources talks about surrendering to paradox as a key practice in the Enlightenment method.
It's so true. We often try to resolve those paradoxes to force things into neat categories, like right or wrong, true or false. But this method, it's like, hey, lean into that tension. Let those seemingly opposite forces exist.
The truth lies somewhere in the middle, kind of thing.
Yeah. And when we surrender to that tension, something new can emerge.
Like a third possibility, something that goes beyond our usual way of thinking.
Exactly. And it even calls it a highly conscious waiting, where we kind of step aside and let a greater wisdom take the lead.
Okay, I'm getting that. It's like that gardener, patiently tending the garden, trusting the process of growth, not needing to control every little thing.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
So we've talked about paradox, we've talked about surrender, but how do we actually live this? How do we make this a part of our daily lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is, and I think that's what we need to unpack in our next segment.